Whether you have Waveform Free or Waveform Pro, you're going to be able to follow along with this Waveform Beginner's Guide, and it's going to have you up and recording and making music in no time. Now, the first thing I like to do with any DAW is to go into my audio settings and make sure it's set up correctly for optimal recording and playback. So let's do that. And this is your welcome screen here. You can see there's audio settings down here, and I could do some changes down there, but let's just go into the settings tab and we'll go to audio devices. And in here we have a few more things that we can do, but we will go back to that other one a little later on in the video. So if you're on a Windows computer like I am, then you want to make sure this is set to ASIO. By default, I think it's set to Windows Audio. So you'll want to click here and change it to ASIO. And that's the low latency driver that's designed for low latency audio recording and music production. So that's the one you want to go with. And the thing about this one is you need to manually install the ASIO driver for your audio interface. So if you haven't done that yet, go to the manufacturer's page for your audio interface and make sure you download the ASIO driver for your audio interface. And then you can use that in here. So after you select ASIO, then you want to go to device, and if it already isn't on your device, it might go to your default sound card that's built into your computer. You could just click there and find your audio interface in there. So mine is this Avid M-Box Studio. I'll change that. Sample rate, it's kind of up to you. There's two really popular ones for home studio music production, and that's 48,000 hertz or 44,100 hertz. And I like to go with the 48,000 hertz. There's probably not that big of a difference between 44,100, so you might want to go with that. It will make the file size a little bit smaller. And the next thing you'll see here is audio buffer size, and this is directly related to your latency. Now, the lower the number, the lower the latency. So you can see, for example here, 8 samples, and it's 0.2 milliseconds roughly latency and that's not going to be noticeable at all. 0.2 milliseconds of latency. So when you're playing along, you're pretty much hearing it in real time. And really, I find up to about 64 samples, sometimes even 128, it's not overly noticeable. Yours might be a little bit different. All audio interfaces have different settings, so you may try the lowest one first and see if that works out for you. But the way audio interfaces can interact with your computer and other things you might have running on your computer, it doesn't mean that the lowest one's going to work for you. So you might have to go to the next one up. And the way you'll notice that it's not working for you is there's going to be stutters, possibly some weird noises and clicks and that sort of thing. The program might crash because you have it too low. So you'll be able to tell if the lowest one's not working. And then you can come back to this screen and go to the next one up. Like I said, up to 64, it's really not noticeable. You can even do 128 and it's still not overly noticeable. But for now, I'm going to set mine to, let's say, 32 samples, just because I have some other things recording this video. So I'm going to set it for that one. Now, some other things you might notice over here is this line. Everything above this line is your outputs. You might only have one thing there, which would be outputs 1 and 2, or you might have more, depending on your audio interface. And everything below this line are your inputs. And again, you might only have 1 and 2 inputs. You might have more. It all depends on your audio interface. If some of these, I'll just do it with this one, are red and they have an X and say disabled, you might want to just click on it to enable it. And when you click on any of these, you can see there's some other options down here. Now, I go deeper into this in my Waveform Basics course, and you might want to check that out. I'll link to that in the description, but this video is just going to be a quicker walkthrough to get you going. So I'm not going to go any deeper into this. Right now, our audio interface is set up for optimal playback and recording, but we will come back to this when we get to the point of mixing, and you'll see why when we get there. All right, now let's create a project. So I'm back on the welcome screen here, which is the first screen you come to when you open up Waveform, unless you change that because you can change it. And we can create a new project right from here. You can also open recent projects from here as well. You'll see a list of those if you have some. So let's just click on New Project, and I'll give this one a name. I'll say Basics Toot 1. All right, and if I want to change the location, which I don't right now, but if I wanted to, I would click here and then I could find wherever on my computer I might want to save that, and I would just click Select Folder, but I'm good with that. Template, I'm not going to use one, but there are templates in here, and you can save your own in here as well, but there are some factory ones. You might want to try those out. We're just going to create a blank project here. And now I'm going to click Create Project. All right, and here is our empty project. The very first thing I always do when I get into a new project is I adjust my workspace so it's not so cluttered. And in Waveform, you have this eyeball up here. So we can click on that, and all of these sections kind of correspond with areas on the screen. So I don't use that browser over there too often, and when I do, I can just easily open it up later. So I'm going to turn that off, and really that's about it for tidying up my user interface here. Now, you might have this bottom properties bar open. I think by default it's always closed now. It used to be open all the time, but when I'm recording, I usually do close that down. I like to have my screen as clutter-free as possible, and this is the basics of what we need here. And now I'm ready to choose if I want to record some audio in, or maybe I want to work with a virtual instrument and MIDI. To start this, I'm going to go with audio recording, but we will get into MIDI right after. All right, I got my guitar connected directly to my audio interface, and I'm ready to record it. So what I like to do first is name the track that I'm going to record it to. This just makes life a lot easier because you know what track is what, but also the recorded file on your computer is going to have that name attached. So if you ever need to go into that folder to find that audio file, you're going to know what it is just by looking at it, because it will have the name attached to it. By default, when you create a new project in Waveform, you have 8 tracks, so we don't need to create one. If you do need to create a track, you can just click this plus sign here, add track, and you can see one's added there. But we'll just start with track 1, and I'll just right click on that, rename track, call it Get 1. There we go. Now what I want to do is click on this part right here. And this allows me to choose the input that I want to record. And I actually have my guitar connected to input 1. So that's right there. If yours is connected to a different input, you would choose whatever one. And now if I strum my guitar, you can see there's a signal going in, but we can't hear it. You can hear it through the microphone, but you can't hear it through the program. So I'm actually just going to close this down so I can show you if you are starting with that closed. We would click this little up arrow there, and we want to go to input monitoring mode. And if you don't see this, you have to make sure you're clicked on this part right here. You can see it's highlighted around there. And we want to go to input monitoring mode. Click here and set this to on. And now, when I play my guitar, you can hear it through the program. So what we need to do now is, you can leave this open if you want, or we can close that down. And we need to arm this track for recording, which means everything coming into that input will be recorded onto this track, but none of these other tracks are going to record anything because none of them are armed for recording. Then the next thing we need to do is just hit record down here. Now, before we do that, there's some things you might want to change, like your BPM or tempo. You could just click in there and change that to whatever you want. I'll leave it at 120 for now. And another thing you might want to enable is your metronome, and that's right here. If you have this expanded, then the metronome is actually called click. So this would be your metronome right there. And yeah, we want that enabled so we can have something to play along to. If you right click on click, there are some options like the volume of the click. You might want it louder, you might want it quieter. You have a count in, and you'll notice I have mine set to 1 bar. And this means when I hit record, I'm going to hear clicks for 1 bar. So it'll go click, 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 and then it's going to start recording. So that gives you time to hit record and then get ready to record. If you don't have the count in, then it's just going to start recording as soon as you hit record. And you might like that. But I do like having the count in, and you can see there's some other options in there as well. You can also set it so it clicks during playback. And that means just when you're playing and not recording, you're going to hear that click, which I like to do when I'm coming up with my songs and I want to figure out the tempo for them. I will have that, but you can turn that off if you want, and you can emphasize downbeats. You can go through this and see whatever other settings you might want to set there. But for me, the main one is that count in. So I have my click enabled and I have my tempo set. So the next thing you want to make sure before you start recording is that your levels are okay. So again, I'll just click here, and I'm going to leave this bottom part open because it does have a bigger meter down here. So let's just, what I like to do is just strum as if I'm recording, or I'll strum really hard to make sure the hardest that I'm going to strum isn't going to clip. And that's not too bad right there. I like to keep it between the about -12 and right about where it was there, or even up to about -5. We could go there. You don't really want it to be too low or it could sound muddy. So you don't want it below -20. And you obviously don't want it over 0 dB because then you're clipping and it's going to introduce some awful artifacts. It's not like clipping analog tape where it might sound nice and a little overdriven. With digital, it sounds awful. So you don't want it to be up there. And the way you adjust your levels is on your audio interface. So you use the gain knob, not the volume knob, the gain knob for that input on your audio interface. You don't use the little fader in here to adjust it. This adjusts just the level that you're hearing it at. It doesn't adjust the level that it's coming in at. So don't adjust this, leave that full for now, and just adjust the level on your actual audio interface. And once your level's set, you are ready to record. I'm just going to lower that down, hit record. We'll hear the count in, and I'll figure out something to record at that time. All right, then you can hit the space bar on your computer keyboard when you're done, or you can press the stop on here or on your Midi controller, whatever works for you to stop it from recording, you can do that. And now we have our guitar recorded in there, and we can continue to record more tracks and build our song out. So I'll just grab my bass guitar and I'll show you what it's like to record onto another track. All right, so now we're going to record to track 2. So I'm going to unarm this track for recording because we don't want to record anything more into this track. And if we leave it armed, then it would. So we'll click on track 2, make sure the input is set up correctly. Again, I have my bass guitar plugged into input 1 there, and we'll arm it for recording. And see if we have to, nope, the input monitoring is already on. I'm going to click so our cursor is back at the beginning here. And again, all I'm going to do is hit record and we'll start recording. And there we go. We have 2 things recorded there. It's Not much of a track, but I'm just showing you very quickly how you can just add more and more audio to your projects and build your song out as you go. And another thing I just noticed is I forgot to name this track. So I'll right click there, rename it bass. And you'll notice here on this first one, this has the name Get One Recording One. And that's the file name. If I went to the folder where this audio clip is saved to, it's going to have that name. This one, and all I'm doing is double clicking in here to make it bigger or smaller. So I'll do that. This one is named Track 2 Recording 1. However, I can change that if I want. So I can click on the clip here, go down to this section, and I might want to just change this to bass. Bass Recording 1. There we go. And now that changes the name there, which shows you why it's kind of important to name it before you record, because it would be annoying to have to do that to every clip. What I typically do when I'm starting a project is I'll go through and add all of the tracks that I plan on having in that project, and I'll just name them. So I'll have guitar 1, 2, 3, 4, however many I want, bass, all my drums, tambourine sometimes, claps, shaker, vocals, backing vocals, doubled vocals, lead guitar, all my things. I'll go through and create all those tracks and have them already named, so I'm ready to just click in here and go. And another thing I like to do before I start recording is I use the markers, or if I'm using Waveform Pro, I'll use the arranger track, but you don't have that on Waveform Free, so I'll just show you with markers. You can see we have the marker track up here. If it wasn't visible for you, you could actually just click on this thing right here, and that kind of minimizes all of those tracks up there. And if we click it again, it's going to show them again. But if you still didn't see markers, then you might need to go up to the eyeball, and you can see the options in here. We have tempo or marker. I might want to get rid of that tempo. We'll get that out of the way because I'm not going to do any tempo changes, but we'll leave marker visible. If this isn't highlighted, then you can click on that and you'll see marker. Now in here, we can just right click where we want it, add bars and beats marker, not an absolute time code marker. You can get into that. It's something a little different. I'm not going to talk about it in this video because it's just beyond the basics of recording. So add bars and beat marker, click there. I'll click on that, and then down here I could call this intro, and maybe I want the intro to be, let's say 4 bars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I can create another one right here, add bars and beat marker, and I could name this one verse 1, and we can change the color, which kind of helps too. And maybe I want that to be 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what I normally do is go through for my whole song and have all of these sections laid out. That way, when I start recording, I know where my intro is, my verse, and it lets me know where I am in the song, so I know where to do the changes and all of that. Plus, when you get into mixing your track, it lets you know where all the different parts are, because you will want to go to the different parts to listen to how everything sounds together in there. So that's your markers or marker track, and you can just keep adding those in there. I do highly recommend using them, the way I said, to give yourself a roadmap for every song you start. I've noticed since I've started doing that method, I finish every single project I started. Now, we're done with audio recording for this. Let's get into using virtual instruments and Midi. So there's a few ways that we can work with Midi and even record Midi. One of them being by recording with a Midi keyboard. And another way you can record Midi is by using your computer keyboard. So I'm going to start with the Midi keyboard, and then we'll get to that other way. And then we'll get into another way we can work with Midi. So what we need to do is add a virtual instrument to our track here. So I'm going to be using track 3. I go over to this plus symbol, click on that, And this is going to bring up a list of plugins that I have on my computer. Now, I have some third-party plugins on here, so if you don't have all of these, don't worry. That's just because they are other ones that I've installed. But for this, I'm just going to use what comes with Waveform free. So I go to Waveform, Instrument, and for OSC, this comes with Waveform free. It's a great little synth. And I'll just play something on my MIDI keyboard here. It works. Now, we might not want that sound. If you click on this star right here, you can see there's some presets. So let's just change this to, I don't know, is there anything like a piano in here? We'll go with organ. Sure, we'll go with organ for this. And we're pretty much ready to record right now. One thing you might want to do, and this doesn't affect the actual recorded MIDI or anything, but you might want to turn it down or up depending on how loud your other stuff is, just so you can hear the other stuff. So let's just play this back. All right, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. I could also pan it if that's something I wanted to do, but it isn't right now. So with a MIDI keyboard, Waveform's being great, and it actually has recognized all the MIDI keyboards that I connect, and I haven't had to do anything extra for them. So hopefully that's the case for you, and as soon as we put a virtual instrument on this track, it becomes a MIDI track, and it set my MIDI input here to all MIDI in. I'm just going to set it to my Minilab 3 MIDI. So if you have more MIDI devices, you might need to change that. So now what it's saying I need to do is just arm this track for recording. And I can hear it. If for some reason you don't see your MIDI device in this list here, we might need to go into settings and then go to MIDI devices. And everything underneath this line here is your input. And that's what you want to focus on with your MIDI keyboard is your input. So it might be disabled in here. And if it's disabled, it's going to look like that. So you might need to just click on it to enable it. And now it's enabled. Then we can just go back here and hopefully you'll see it in this list here. Now, another thing you might want to check is if you connected your MIDI keyboard after Waveform's been open, sometimes it might not show up there, but it's been pretty good for me and it usually shows up once I connect it, but that is something to do. You might need to close down Waveform, connect your MIDI keyboard, or if it's already connected, then reopen Waveform while it's connected. But right now we're ready to record our MIDI in. So I have it armed for recording. I'll just minimize this down here again, and I'm going to hit record. All right, so this track is coming along, we'll say. But yeah, there's some MIDI information that's being recorded right there. If I double click on it, it brings up our piano roll and I could edit things. I can go over here and I might want to make this a little bit bigger to work on. So I'll just click this plus sign over here, scroll down, and now you can see our notes are a little bit bigger and I can click and move that around. Or I'll just undo all of that I just did. What I might want to do is click and select all of those and go down to quantize. And I might want to go to note start time. So I'm going to quantize the start of each note and I'll do it to the nearest beat. So I'll just click on that and you can see it's quantized everything to the nearest beat. More in time, less human feeling, I guess. So there is that. Now I'm just going to close down our piano roll here by clicking that X. And you can see I didn't record all the way to the end, but it's a repetitive pattern. So what I could do is just trim this by clicking that little triangle at the edge of the clip. click and drag to trim that down. And I'll also have to do that for the beginning of the clip. Click and drag there. And now this clip is something that I can duplicate. So I can right click on there and duplicate, or I could also hit D on the computer keyboard and it's going to do that as well. So now it's going to repeat that as many times as I want to duplicate it. The thing is, this is MIDI information. So if we don't like that virtual instrument, you can change it. You can change the preset, because MIDI information is not audio. It's just data. It tells Waveform what notes to press and the velocity to press them at and when to press them. That's all it does. There's no audio attached to it. So we could go in here and let's say we want to change it to this flute sound. We'll press play. All right, and that's what we've done. Now, that guitar that I recorded and the bass, they sound pretty plain because they're not going through an amp sim. We'll get into that in a little bit here. That was one way that we can record audio. The other way is to use our computer keyboard. So we'll go down to the next track here, unarm that one for recording, and we'll add an instrument again. We'll add that 4-OSC again. This time we'll, I don't know, set it to the works. Let's set it to that. I'm just going to turn it down because the works sounds like it's going to be loud. And this time, if you have this bottom properties bar open, just close it down and you'll see this little icon here. Click on that and press Shift Lock or Caps Lock on your computer keyboard. And with Caps Lock on, you'll see these keys here represent the keys on this piano. So if I press an A, those keys represent what's in here. And we can change the octave by using Z and X. And you can also change the velocity, but you might want to do that when you get into editing the MIDI later, but you can do that right off the bat if you want. So now let's arm this track for recording, and you'll notice I didn't have to change anything in the input. It's just kind of there. So arm this track for recording. We'll go back to the beginning here, and then I'll just hit record and we'll record this. All right, hit spacebar and I'm done recording. I might also want to take the caps lock off and close that down. And I'm just going to unarm it for recording, then double click, open up our piano roll, and you can see we have our MIDI information. I know I accidentally slipped and hit a wrong key right here. So I'm going to just right click on that and delete. So I didn't want that one, but I'll select all my MIDI and we'll quantize it again. Go to quantize start note time, nearest beat, and there we go. This is all in time. Now, another thing we can do in here is transpose. So maybe let's just hit solo so we can just hear this track. Maybe that's a little too high and I wanted it lower. So I'll just transpose down 1 octave. And it's brought everything down, so we gotta scroll down. Maybe I don't like that and I want it to be up an octave or maybe 2. We have that option there, but I'm going to go back to the normal one where we originally recorded it. There we go. Another thing you'll notice in here are these little velocity bars down here, and that's how hard we hit our keyboard. If I was recording this on like a MIDI keyboard, that would be adjusted, but because we're just using a computer keyboard, all of the velocities are the exact same. So you might want to go in here and change it up a little bit. So maybe one's a little bit less. So you might just want to go through and change the velocities. You don't have to, but it is something you might want to do, and it's good to be aware that you can do that. So let's close this down now, and we'll look at another way to work with MIDI. So I'm going to unsolo that. We'll go to the next track, and this time I'm going to add an instrument, waveform, instrument, but I'm going to add the micro drum sampler because we need some drums in here. So right now, you won't hear anything if we hit any of these pads. That's because there's no preset loaded. So we click here and we'll want to load a preset. I'll just load, let's try this lo-fi kit. And if we play it now, now, I don't know if all of those kits are available in Waveform Free. I am using Waveform Free, and pretty much everything for Waveform Free should be visible to me. But I know before you only had the 2 kits available in Waveform Free, so this could be something because I do have Waveform Pro. So if you don't see those other ones, don't be alarmed. If you do see them, that's awesome. That means they've added some more things into Waveform Free. But now let's add some drums to this cheesy track that I've started here. So this time we're going to work with the step sequencer or a step clip. So I can right click here and insert new step clip. All right, there's our step clip, and I'm just going to double click on it. And here is our step clip that we can work with. And you can see there's names over here for everything. That's just because I'm using a waveform plugin. If you add a third-party drum plugin, these aren't going to be the same in that plugin, but you can rename all of these. So if I just right click, you can see I can rename that row if I wanted to. But what we can do right now is I can just click in here. You can see this is kick. So maybe I want a kick there, and then maybe a snare right down here. And then a kick here again. Oops. And if you make a mistake, you just have to click on it again. So then a kick there. Let's just hear how that sounds right now. All right, so that's the start of something. Maybe I want to draw in some hi-hats here. So there we go. Click there. All right, we'll listen to that. And I only have it for 1 bar. So we can add another bar in here. I'll just click and drag that so it covers another bar. But you'll notice it just repeats the same pattern over and over again. So what I might want to do is click on this plus sign here and add a variation. And now it's added that variation, which is variation 1. It's the same as this one, but I can click here and say new variation. So now it's variation 2. If I change anything here, it's not going to change what was at the beginning. So maybe in here, I want this hi-hat to be an open one. So I'll do that. Scroll over, and maybe I want this one to be an open one as well. So let's just listen to that. And if I click down here, I can do add pattern section at end. And now it's added another section in there, variation 3. But what if I want to go back to variation 1? I can easily just click there. You can see we have different variations now. I can go back to variation 1. And this is going to just copy the same stuff from that first one. It's going to be exactly the same. If I change anything in this first one, it's also going to change in here, but it won't change variation 2. And you can go through and build out your whole song just by using the one step clip and continuing to add the different sections in there. And you can even try out different variations that you might come up with just by clicking and changing the variation. So that is your step clip right there. It's a really handy tool. I love it for working with drum instruments, but you can also program your drum instruments into a regular MIDI clip. We would just right click there, insert new MIDI clip, and here we go. We have our MIDI clip, and then you would just have to figure out which one of these keys goes with what drum. All right, so that's working with instruments and plugins that come with Waveform. What if you want to add plugins to Waveform? So what you would have to do is just find some that you like. There's a lot of freebies out there. I'll be sure to link to a video down below that has over 50 free plugins that you can add, and they're all high quality plugins. So be sure to check out that video. But once you find a plugin that you want to make sure it works with Waveform. Waveform uses 64-bit VST2 or VST3 plugins. So you want to make sure it's 64-bit, and it should be available as VST2 or VST3. That's the popular formats. If it's available as both, install the VST3 version because that's the better one to go with. Let's just look at the plugin section here. By default, Waveform automatically checks for newly added plugins. So once you install a new plugin, the good thing with VST3 plugins is Waveform is already set up to search that folder because it's the same folder on all computers, and it will find any new plugins that are put in there. A thing will pop up on the screen saying new plugin found, and you just click OK. If this wasn't clicked, then you'd have to manually click scan for plugins, and you would scan for VST3 or whatever ones you wanted in there. Another thing in this window that you might want to change is the plugin sorting. So you saw over here, when I click on the plus, it's sorting our plugins by manufacturer, which is the way I like to sort them. But if we go back here, you can have it sort by disk location. So if you have different folders, this mainly works best for the VST2 plugins, but you could have it sort that way. You could have it sort by category, and it does do a pretty good job at figuring out what category each plugin is. So you could, if you want your compressors all in a category and reverbs, all that sort of thing, you could do that, or manufacturer. So that's something you might want to change. That's up to you. We're not going to worry about any of the other things in there for this video, but let's look at adding a third-party plugin, and I'll add it to my guitar here. And I know I have an amp sim in here, white amp. We'll add that. There's our white amp. And again, this one has presets in here. Some plugins might not have its own built-in preset browser, and you'll have to use the one that's built into Waveform. So you would just click on the plugin, and then down here you can see load. And if it's one that uses the built-in browser to your DAW, you would see some options in here. This one doesn't, so there's no options in there. But do know some plugins will use this for their preset browser. But let's just solo our guitar and hear how that sounds. I like the sound a lot more with that on there. And I might also want to increase the master volume a bit. There we go. I like that. And maybe I want to add a bass amp sim. So I will click here. And I know I have a bass amp sim in here. Go to Ampeg right here. And we'll solo that one. Not bad. Let's listen to all of this together now. There we go. We have a track that's coming together, and we can continue to add more effects in here. The thing with effects, adding them onto instrument tracks, is you want to make sure the effect is after the instrument plugin. So I'll show you what I mean. And if I add an effect, actually Waveform comes with some great effects. So you might not even want to add any third-party ones if you're a little bit intimidated by it. So let's say I add this 8-band equalizer. It's automatically adding it after the instrument because it understands this needs to go after the instrument. If we put it in front, you can drag your plugins in whatever order you want them to go in. But if you put it in front, it's not going to do anything because it's going to add EQ to MIDI information, which isn't audio. So there's no EQ being added because EQ needs audio. So you always want to make sure your effects come after the instrument plugin in here. And when you do get to the mixing stage of your project, meaning you've recorded everything in, so I always recommend record all of your audio in, all of your MIDI, and have everything ready to go with very minimal plugins added in here. Maybe just your amp sims, your instrument plugins, and if there's a creative effect that's actually necessary for whatever it is you're recording, you can have that in there. But I do recommend limiting things like time effects, delays, reverbs, that sort of thing, because it can increase latency when you're recording. So have very minimal in here while you're recording. Then when you get to mixing, you can start to add those. But before you start mixing, I recommend going back to the welcome screen and increasing your audio buffer size. So at the start, I was down very low, but I usually increase it to 1024 samples when I'm mixing because there's actually some plugins that call for that, like Melodyne. So I increase it to that because latency no longer matters here as we're all done recording. Now, another thing I recommend doing before we start mixing is saving an edit. So you have your base edit here with your no plugins. It's just all your recordings. You might want to go back and record some things over or record some new things in. So what we can do is go here, save edit as, and we'll just call this edit 2 because that's what it's saying by default. So save. And now this is edit 2, and then we can start mixing in edit 2. But if we need to go back and record some stuff, we can open edit 1. And I'll show you how we'll do that. We'll go to projects. That's this tab here. And you can see over in this section, basics toot. So I would click on that, and this has all of our edits here. So if we continue to add more and more edits, which I like to do every time I make changes, I'll create a new edit. And we can load up edit 1, which would be different from edit 2. And then that way we can open that edit 1, record some new stuff in or re-record some stuff if we need to. And then you can actually copy those audio files into the edit. So if I open edit 1 here and say I want to copy this, I would click on it, Control C on my computer keyboard, then go to projects and open edit 2, which opens in another tab. And let's say I want to put that audio here. I'll just right click, paste, and there's that audio. So that's how we can bring audio in from other edits if we need to do that. So I'll just save this edit now, and we'll close down that other edit. We don't need it anymore. And the very minimum you should be doing for mixing is at least adjusting levels and maybe your pan. And you can do that right in this section right here. Now, some people might like that more traditional mixer or console looking thing. If we go up to the eyeball up here and click on this, we're going to have that kind of more traditional one. It's not so traditional in waveform, but here's your faders down here and your panning there. So you can adjust your levels and your panning in here. Or if you're like me, you can just do it all over to the side. I find this makes things super quick, just working over in that section there. Now let's look at doing a bit of clip editing, because we kind of looked at that a little bit with the MIDI, but we might want to tidy things up. And like we saw earlier, we click on that triangle, drag, just to tidy this up a little bit. Now, what if we want to split this? Well, we can click where we want to split it, say right there, right click, and then split. There's also a computer keyboard shortcut. You can see the / on your computer keyboard will split it as well. And now this is 2 separate clips. But if we click here, we can extend that again if we wanted to, because it's not cutting out that information from the clip. It's just creating 2 clips from the one. You can also hover your mouse over this little box there and click, and you can see that's going to create fade in and fade outs right there. If you want to add effects to the clip, so the clip effects, you would click that effects box, add clip effect, and then you can see there's some things in here. We can adjust the volume of this clip, and you can add plugins, other things you can do in there. That's your clip effects. So that's going to be separate from the effects that are on the track. It's only going to affect this clip, and that's it. And like we looked at before, we can duplicate audio clips. So duplicate, and you can continue to do that however you want and piece together your song, because you might want to copy an entire chorus, copy it down the line to where the next chorus would be. Maybe there's drum parts you want to copy later on. You can just right click on that, copy, and then paste that in down further, move it around however you want. Just arrange your track however it's needed. So let's say we've arranged our track and it's the way we want. I'm just going to bring this in closer. But now we might want to mix this down to an audio file so we can share it on social media or send it to fans and friends. If you don't have that bottom part open, you can click this here and go to File and then Export Render to File. If you do have this open, just go to File, Export Render to a File. And now we can see in here, we have some options. Now, this is usually automatically clicked, and that means once you click on that render to file, it's going to just start rendering as soon as this is open, and it's kind of annoying. I always disable that, so I do recommend disabling it because you might want to change some settings in here. Like format, you might want to save it to an MP3 or one of the other options. Or sample rate, you might want to change. Sample size, you might want to change. And sometimes you want to just render a specific track. So you can do that in here, and you can also change where you want to save this to. But I'll just save it to the exported folder, and we're good with the stereo. So let's click render. We could see it was rendered. And now if we go to our folder there is our audio track that we just mixed down. And there you have it. You have your file that you can now share online. And this is just a quick overview of what's in my Waveform Basics course, which goes deeper into all of these things. And if you want to check that out, click the video on the screen right there. Also click the other video if you want to get some of those free effects and plugins that I told you about. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. For Audio Tech TV, I'm Zane. Keep creating. Fist bump. Thumbs up.